Point USA is turning our country around. And I want to give a special greeting. I heard there's a couple of dozen Hoosiers that are in the house. Proud of you all. And it's especially great to be here with a young man I've gotten to know over the last 4 years. Someone who I truly believe has emerged as one of the clearest thinking and brightest rising stars in the conservative movement in this country. Would you join me in thanking Turning Point's Charlie Kirk for his great leadership of this movement? Great job. It really is great to be here with so many friends during such a special week in the life of our nation. And speaking of friends of mine, allow me to bring greetings from another friend of mine, a leader who has fought every day to keep the promises he's made to the American people, and a man who will never stop fighting to make America great again. I bring greetings from the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. You know, it's amazing to think, with your support, President Trump and our team received more than 74 million votes across America. 10 million more than in 2016, and more votes than any incumbent president in American history. We flipped 12 seats in the United States Congress. And the president actually received the greatest share of minority votes for a Republican president in 60 years. And come January 5th, we're going to hold the line in the United States Senate when we re-elect Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue to a Republican majority on Capitol Hill. And as our election contest continues, I'll make you a promise. We're going to keep fighting until every legal vote is counted. We're going to keep fighting until every illegal vote is thrown out. We're going to win Georgia, we're going to save America, and we'll never stop fighting to make America great again. You watch. But I came here today after what I know has been a great conference here at Turning Point, just to say thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your hard work, your enthusiasm, and your prayers. But I came here today to say to the men and women of Turning Point USA, stay in the fight. Stay in the fight for election integrity. Stay in the fight to defend all we've done. And stay in the fight from this Student Action Summit and every day forward to keep America great. It's amazing to think, with your support, what we've achieved under President Trump's leadership. Against unrelenting resistance and attacks from the Democrats, the radical left, and their allies in the media. We've made incredible progress. I mean, think about it. 4 years ago, we inherited a military hollowed out by reckless budget cuts, an economy struggling to break out of the worst recovery since the Great Depression. Terrorism was on the rise, and we witnessed a steady assault on our most cherished values. But with your support, under President Donald Trump, We rebuilt our military. We revived this economy. We secured our border, stood with law enforcement. And we fought for life and liberty and the Constitution of the United States of America. You know, it's an honor to be your vice president, but the highest title I'll ever hold is DAD. And as your vice president and as the proud father of a United States Marine, I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside a president who cares so deeply about the men and women of our armed forces. President Trump has actually signed the largest increases in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. We're finally giving our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force the support they deserve to defend this nation. True. And with that renewed American strength, we've stood with our allies and we've stood up to our enemies. We took the fight to radical Islamic terrorists on our terms, on their soil. At the direction of our Commander-in-Chief, the Armed Forces of the United States took down the last inch of territory under the black flag of ISIS and took out their leader without one American casualty. And President Trump withdrew from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. And when the most dangerous terrorist in the world, an Iranian general responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members, was in our sights, President Trump took action and Qasem Soleimani is gone. So we've stood up to our enemies, but we've stood with our most cherished ally as never before. Where 4 presidents in a row had made the promise to the American people, it was President Donald Trump who kept his promise and moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. And now, for the first time in 26 years, 4 Arab countries have recognized Israel's right to exist. That is peace through strength. So we rebuilt our military and stood strong on the world for our allies and our ideals. And here at home, under this president's leadership, we revived the American economy. After the slowest recovery in 75 years, President Trump cut taxes across the board for working families and businesses. We rolled back regulation at a historic pace, fought for free and fair trade, and unleashed American energy. In fact, it was 3 years ago today that President Trump signed the largest tax cuts and tax reform in history. The result? In 3 short years, businesses large and small created more than 7 million good-paying jobs, and wages rose at their fastest pace in more than 10 years, and they rose most rapidly for African Americans and Hispanic Americans. The forgotten men and women are forgotten no more. After our first 3 years in office, more Americans were working than ever before. And then 2020 arrived. And the coronavirus pandemic struck from China. And under President Trump's leadership, America responded. We launched the largest national mobilization since World War II. We reinvented testing from a standing start. We saw to the delivery of billions of medical supplies and equipment to hospitals all across the land, and we secured direct support for businesses and working families and developed new medicines that are saving lives every single day. It's amazing to think, at the height of this pandemic, 22 million Americans lost their jobs all across the country. But because of the strong foundation this president poured, because of the unprecedented support for families and businesses, we've already seen more than 12 million Americans go back to work. We are opening up America again. And most important of all, after a year of hardship and heartbreak for the American people, President Trump delivered on his promise, and today we have not one but 2 safe and effective coronavirus vaccines being administered all across America. Some said it couldn't be done, but in this season of hope, hope is on the way. And thanks to your president and incredible American ingenuity, under Operation Warp Speed, we have come to the beginning of the end of the coronavirus pandemic. It's a medical miracle, and a promise made, and a promise kept. So we're healing America, and all along the way, like all of you, we've been defending freedom. You know, I couldn't be more proud to tell you, as of today, this president has already appointed more than 220 conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And they are all men and women who will uphold all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution, like the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, and the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And that includes Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Isn't she great? Isn't she great? Didn't you like it in that hearing? They said to her, what do you got written on that piece of paper in front of you there? She said, nothing, right? And those appointments are more important than ever before. Because the truth is, before we took office under the last administration, you remember it, we saw a steady assault on our values and on our freedoms. The last administration actually trampled on the religious liberty of Americans, violated the conscience rights of doctors and nurses and religious charities. They even hauled a group of Catholic nuns into federal court to order them to compromise their faith to live under the standards of Obamacare. In fact, we saw that religious intolerance writ large when Amy Coney Barrett was up for a Court of Appeals post a couple years ago, you remember? The #1 Democrat on the Judiciary Committee said that she was concerned about Amy Coney Barrett's Christian faith. In fact, she said, and I quote, because, quote, the dogma lives loudly within you. And Hollywood liberals have been attacking Amy Coney Barrett for her Christian faith ever since, haven't they? Well, I got news for the Democrats in Washington and their Hollywood friends. That dogma lives loudly in me. That dogma lives loudly in you. And the right to live and worship according to the dictates of our faith lives loudly in the Constitution of the United States of America. It's why these court appointments have been more important than ever before. It's also why that Georgia race, Loeffler and Perdue, are more important than ever before. And working with all of you, we've defended our first freedom, the freedom of religion. But we've also stood strong for the freedom of speech on campuses across America. Justice Alito gave a speech a little while back to the Federalist Society. You ought to check it out. He said, and I quote, "We need to do whatever we can to prevent the freedom of speech from becoming a second-tier constitutional right." And that's just what we've done. Under President Trump's leadership, we've gone into federal court to defend the freedom of speech on campuses in America, and this president signed an executive order directing federal agencies to tie research grants to the defense of the freedom of speech. TPUSA, we have to fight for the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression on our colleges and universities and campuses across America. Got to stand up. The president has stood strong, our entire administration, for all of our freedoms and the values that have made this country great. And maybe most of all to me, I couldn't be more proud to be vice president to a president who has stood without apology for the sanctity of human life. President Donald Trump is the most pro-life president in American history. Good. So I don't think I have to tell you this, so for all we've done, for all we have yet to do, stay in the fight. Stay in the fight in our election. Stay in the fight in Georgia's election. And stay in the fight every day that follows. We need you to stay in the fight, to be a check on what the Democrats and the radical left want to do and what they want to undo, all that we've done. You know, our agenda is about American greatness. Their agenda is about American decline. Where we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, and advanced freedom, their agenda is higher taxes, open borders, socialized medicine, a Green New Deal, and abortion on demand. They want to make rich people poorer and poor people more comfortable. We have fought to make every American richer, and that's exactly what we've done. Under President Donald Trump, median household income in America rose by the largest amount ever recorded. A rising tide lifts all boats. So men and women of TPUSA, you stay in the fight. To finish what we started, the President and I are counting on all of you. We need your voices. We need this energy. And we need your vision. We need you to stay in the fight for freedom, because the fight for freedom never ends. You know, my second favorite president used to say, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. But looking out at the enthusiasm represented here in this generation, I believe we're going to win this generation for freedom. You know, today, Democrats openly advocate an economic system that has impoverished millions around the world. Under the guise of Medicare for all and a Green New Deal, Democrats are embracing the same tired economic theories that have impoverished nations and stifled the liberties of millions of people over the past century. But let's be clear. It was freedom, not socialism, that gave us the most prosperous economy in the history of the world. It was freedom, not socialism, that ended slavery, won 2 world wars, and stands today as a beacon of hope for all the world. It was freedom, not socialism, that's moving us beyond the prejudices of the past to form a more perfect union and extend the blessings of liberty to every American, regardless of race or creed or color. It's freedom. You here at TPUS understood that it was freedom, not socialism, that gave us the highest quality of life, the cleanest environment on earth, has improved the health and well-being of millions around the world. And so I challenge you, in this generation, on this day and every day forward, to speak with one voice, that America will be a land of freedom and America will never be a socialist country. So it's really great to be with you today, with this rising generation of conservative leaders. You are an impressive sight. I came here today to thank you and to challenge you, because this is your moment. You know, 3 years ago in Poland, President Trump declared, and I quote, "The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive." As we gather here today, we should ask ourselves the very same question. Do you have the confidence in our ideals and values to defend them against opposition and resistance and criticism and ridicule? Do you have the courage to fight for freedom? But looking out across this room, I know you do. Because it's clear to me, I'm not just looking at the leaders of a generation or the future leaders of the conservative leaders of America. So as I close, let me just give you a word of encouragement. I want to encourage you to have faith. Have faith in yourselves and in your own capacity to make a difference in the life of your family, your community, your state, your nation. Speak your dreams. It's the first test of someone that would step into the public square. You've got to be willing to look people in the eye and say, I've got a heart to serve, and I'm willing to step forward and help lead America. You do that. Believe in yourself. And have faith in this president who will never stop fighting. who built the biggest and broadest coalition of conservatives in the history of this country and is going to keep fighting to make America great again. Have faith in the American people. You know, I truly do believe that a careful study of American history shows every time the American people are presented with a vision and with leadership founded in freedom, the American people choose freedom every time. So as you return to your homes and stay in the fight and you speak up, be confident. Be confident in yourselves. Be confident in the leadership that we have in this president and all of us who serve around him. Be confident that the American people are ready, willing, and able. Inscribed on the side of the Liberty Bell is an ancient verse that says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land and unto all the inhabitants thereof." When we proclaim liberty in these United States, the American people rally to our cause. You go do it. And finally, after this challenging year, if you're of a mind on this Christmas week, I'd encourage you to take time to be still. Reflect on the blessings in your life, the blessings of your families, the blessings of having been born and raised in the greatest nation in the history of the world. And also take a moment to be still, and if you're inclined, as we do at my house, come Christmas morning, take a moment to reflect on the grace that came to mankind, wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger so many years ago. For all the battles behind us, for all the battles we're in today, battles that lie ahead, we do well to remember here at this Student Action Summit that even youths grow tired and weary, and the young stumble and fall. But as the Bible tells us, those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They'll soar on wings like eagles. You will run and not grow weary. You will walk and not be faint. Proclaim that grace and run the race. And I believe if you do that, you believe in that dream that's in your heart to serve and to lead. You trust the leaders that have been raised up this time in the life of our nation. Believe in the American people and put your faith in Him who has ever guided the destiny of this great land. I believe we're going to keep on winning. We're going to keep our freedom for this generation and the next. And the best days for the conservative movement and for the United States of America are yet to come. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless America.
Vice President Mike Pence wrapping up there in West Palm Beach, Florida at the Turning Point USA Conservative Student Summit there, an annual event, and really he was the keynote speaker there and, of course, the headliner as well. You're watching News Now from Fox. Thank you so much for joining us here worldwide as always. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break for some of you. We appreciate you joining us here today as we're just getting started for you. Live looker right now at New York's Times Square 2021 is in distance now, folks. Let's sprint to it. More news now from Fox in just a bit. For those of you hanging on with us, we always appreciate it. We're going to get this vaccine update from Fox 32 Chicago.
Walgreens, as we all know, is one of the locations that thousands are expected to go to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations when they become available. And right now, the vaccine rollout is going to frontline healthcare workers and long-term care facilities. And we are joined by Dr. Kevin Ban, the Chief Medical Officer at Walgreens this morning. Good morning to you, Dr. Ban. Nice to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Sylvia. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, let's talk about where you guys are with this vaccination. I know that you have already started administering this, and how's it going?
It's actually going very well. We started last week in a few long-term care facilities, and already this week we are in 12 different states. The plan is that we will scale this out across the country as soon as next week in these long-term care facilities.
So there's been some concern about how people in underserved communities are going to have access to this vaccine. What's the plan to make sure that they're not left out of this?
Sylvia, this is really core to who we are as a company. More than 80% of the American population lives within about 5 miles of a Walgreens, but that's not enough. We are putting up mobile clinics. We're going to be doing off-site clinics when the vaccine is available to the general public in community centers and churches. You know, I'll use a really concrete example. We started COVID testing in the spring. Already more than 70% of our testing sites are in vulnerable communities. Our intention is that we're going to continue to lean into that. We want to make sure that those people have all of the resources that they need to make it through this pandemic.
Okay, so tell people, they're going to be curious, once it becomes available and more widespread, how is this going to work?
So the way this works is, of course, you mentioned phase 1. We are putting the vaccine into the hands of the healthcare systems so the folks at the front lines get the vaccine, as well as people living in long-term care facilities. We think we can get through this work by March. So consider early April, we expect to begin vaccinating to the general population. And there we're going to lead into our infrastructure. In the same way we do flu vaccines, we want people to schedule in advance. There are really 3 ways to do it, Sylvia. You can use our app, My Walgreens. You can go online to our website, or you can call. But we're really encouraging people, once it's available, and it still isn't, but once it's available, that they schedule.
Yeah, and really, there's no hardcore answer as to when exactly that is going to be right now. But as you said, you're hoping somewhere near the spring, maybe early summer. Okay, so one of the big discussions, especially with this Pfizer vaccine, is that it has to be in that ultra cold storage. What's Walgreens doing to make sure that all these vaccines are being stored in the proper facilities so that they remain effective? That has to be very stressful to make sure that that is happening.
Well, the important thing here is we're not starting from scratch. We have more than 15 years of experience in distributing and administering vaccines, so we have a strong infrastructure. What we've done is we've set up a system whereby we've purchased ultra-cold freezers, and we're using dry ice to make sure that the vaccine is always at the proper temperature, and we monitor it to make sure that it stays there. And then we distribute, make sure that it's there in time for administration. So we feel very confident that we can handle this.
You know, I'm curious for you, because the ultra cold storage has come up a lot, but what is actually the biggest challenge for a company like yours when faced with such a mass vaccination program? Because this isn't something most people have seen in our lifetime.
That's true, and there tends to be a lot of focus, Sylvia, on the distribution and the administration. I think equally important is the education. Now, I've been tracking this vaccine really since the beginning, all the way through phase 1, phase 2, and now phase 3. But for many people, this is new, and it feels like it's a lot of information. So one of the things I want to do is ease people's concerns. This is a very effective vaccine. It's also a very safe vaccine. So I'd encourage people to go out, get good information, and make a decision for yourself and for your families.
Dr. Kevin Ban with Walgreens, good luck to you guys. You have a big job ahead of you. As you said, you've done this in the past, even though it's a little bit different. And I think people can feel better hearing from you about how this is going to work. So thank you for joining me this morning. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Walgreens.
Live look at the Capitol right now, and now we'll show you the White House here. Could this be the day that President Trump will sign the stimulus bill? If that happens, we'll bring it to you right here on News Now from Fox. We're going to take another 2-minute break here and stay right here with us.
Universal vaccination of adults, vaccination of children will eventually result in an immune population, just as is the case with other agents for which we vaccinate. So in summary, my argument is that if assuming that SARS-2 virus becomes a permanent threat, that we are going to have to include children in our plans for vaccination in order to maintain control of the epidemic, to protect people who are likely to have serious disease, such as grandparents, but also to protect the children themselves. And I would also add, it's not on this slide, but in thinking about this, at least in the U.S., the possibility of making vaccination against SARS-2 mandatory is an important point, because, of course, that's what we do with other vaccines in childhood, the argument being that that is the best way to protect our innocent children, and, by the way, also to protect the population at large. So now I admit that this is an early statement, that we do not yet know which vaccines would be the optimal vaccines for children. And there are other aspects of the disease that we're just learning about. But looking ahead, and I think we should always do that, looking ahead, I do believe that children should eventually be vaccinated. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Plotkin. Very helpful remarks.
I'm
A couple of minutes ahead of time.
Dr. Hopkins, it's a little hard to hear you.
Turn up my microphone here. Thank you for your remarks, Dr. Plotkin. That was very helpful. We're running a bit ahead of time. Do any of the members of the committee have a question or comment for Dr. Plotkin before we move forward?
Bob, it's Tim Cook. I do.
Please, Tim, go ahead.
But it's not related to the question about pregnancy in children. So I hope I'm not barging in on other people's questions that may be. But one of our charges, and let me, here, I'll show my screen. Sorry. One of the charges that NVAC has from the ASH is to make recommendations on what lessons were learned from COVID-19 vaccine development and how we can use these in the future to promote innovation and shorten timelines. So, Dr. Plotkin, it's great to have you back at NVAC again. And I wondered if, you've been at this a long time and whether you had thoughts on, what lessons will be learned. And I know these would be the early lessons so far, and there's a lot more lessons to be learned about how we can innovate more around vaccine development in the future. But if you could share any thoughts, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, so thank you for those questions, which are big questions.
Yeah.
What has struck me about this experience are basically two things. One, that fortunately, And in part because of financing by the federal government, all hands are on deck. That is to say, all of the platforms that are used to develop vaccines, including, of course, the newer ones, are being used to develop the vaccines against SARS-2, and that is great. I mean, that shows that given an emergency, the scientific community can respond rapidly, and in the event of another disease, I'll come back to that.
We're going to take another 2-minute break right here for you on News Now from Fox.
Will respond. That is, assuming that they get enough support, financial support from the government. Although not every organization has needed that, but most have. The second point is one that goes back a bit. In 2015, I believe it was, I wrote an article with Jeremy Farrar from the Wellcome Trust, anyway, I wrote an article that in the New England Journal that proposed the development of an organization to deal with emerging infections, to develop vaccines against emerging infections. And that was because of the Ebola experience. And fortunately, that idea, which wasn't really that brilliant, but it took off, and now we have CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. They are financing some of the vaccines against COVID, and they are financing development of vaccines against many other infections for which there's no commercial interest. I think we have to pursue that in the future. If you look at all of the agents which are now in animals, some of which are obviously capable of jumping to humans, such as SARS-2, we could start vaccine development now, assuming that there's enough financial support. And we now have an organization that could handle that. So my second perception, if you will, is that we have a way now to try to deal with emerging infections at an early point before they become a pandemic, such as SARS-2, and we should take advantage of that opportunity. So I've tried to answer your question as much as I can.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Plotkin. I think that's definitely one of the lessons learned in here, and how to use the partnerships like CEPI to be able to combat these different emerging infections as quickly as we can. I also think it's a great opportunity to have so many different vaccine platforms, and particularly new platforms like mRNA and some of the recombinant live virals go at the same, the same target at the same time. And I can't help but think we're going to learn a tremendous amount about which platforms are good for either getting there quickly or getting there cheaply, or being stored at reasonable temperatures and all of that. So I think it'll be very interesting.
I do think that the U.S. government has to think hard about their ability to handle this. I'm not saying that the federal response was poor. It definitely was not poor, but I think it was somewhat disorganized at the beginning. And so again, my emphasis is being ready for this type of event. You know, when you think about it, there's been Ebola, Zika, SARS-2, and others, and they've been recent. You know, that's not going back to the 1918 influenza. These are recent events, chikungunya, and we should be able to deal with these in a better way than we have been.
Okay, well, thanks so much. I'll stop there, and sorry if I've intruded on some questions about pregnancy and children, but thank you, Dr. Plotkin.
Bob, this is Cody Meissner. Can I ask a question?
Cody, I think Daniel looks like he was up before you, and then I'll put you next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Cody, for being patient. And thank you, Dr. Plotkin, for your wonderful comments. I think we all are thinking that it's important to be vaccinating children, pregnant females at some point, but also that we are wanting to be very careful about when. The sort of general concept, I think, is we need to have plenty of safety data in the adults first before we really contemplate this in a big way in these special populations. But I just wondered if I could ask for more granularity, in your opinion, on the timing of it. I think what we are thinking is that certainly after EUA as a minimum on some vaccine. But I'm just wondering what you would think about starting clinical trials in these populations, bridging trials in kids and in pregnant females, starting as soon as possible after EUA is given, or would you wait until there's actual official licensure of the vaccine?
Well, thank you for that question. Oops.
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what's happening here, but thank you for that question. And I entirely agree that trials should be started now, because we have, I think, already, at least with several of the vaccines, sufficient evidence of safety in adults. So I think we have the right to start vaccinating children so that we have the clinical data after all of the other populations have been vaccinated. And if I understand correctly, by the middle of 2021, all of the target populations will have been offered vaccination. So we should start soon in children so that we have clinical data by, let's say, the second half of 2021, and can then decide whether to push ahead or not.
Thank you. I think Cody will probably follow up on that.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you, Dr. Plotkin. It's always an educational experience to hear your comments. I would like to ask you what your thoughts are about the mRNA vaccines. That is, it seems quite interesting that both vaccines came up with efficacy rates that are pretty similar, of 95%. And it seems to me we should interpret that as reassuring that, in fact, these vaccines are going to be effective, at least in the short term. And do you have any thoughts about how durable that immunity might be, in thinking in comparison that the conventional coronaviruses, which we've all known about for many years, the immunity tends to wane? And do you think it might be different with this virus?
So, Cody, that's a good question, and I can only give a very partial answer, because the two main things we don't know yet are can we prevent mucosal replication of the virus with the vaccines, and how long will protection last? Or to put it another way, what is the correlate of protection? How much assuming it's neutralizing antibody, how much neutralizing antibody does one need? Actually, the mRNA vaccines have been so effective that the data from them is probably not going to allow much in the way of a conclusion about that. But the data with the AstraZeneca adenovirus vaccine should allow us to determine whether or what the level of neutralizing antibody is that is protective. I assume, I hope I'm right, I assume that there are specimens available to measure neutralization after vaccination, and then to look at who got infected and who didn't. So all I can say about the mRNA vaccines is there is evidence of B-cell memory, but again, we don't know yet what level of antibody is necessary. But it's, of course, as you know, it's complicated. It could be that having memory would allow a anamnestic response to occur at the time of exposure, and therefore protection to occur even though antibodies have waned. But there are so many factors that we need to know. With this disease has a relatively short incubation period. And unfortunately, as a generalization with vaccines, those with short incubation periods cannot rely on memory. So, I don't know the answer to your question. And I can only know after we have more data. And incidentally, if I can, ring a bell, that's one of the arguments for human challenges, to determine what is the duration of immunity after vaccination in vaccinated people. It is a key question. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Plotkin, thank you. You always teach us. I don't think I've ever heard you speak where I haven't learned at least 2 or 3 new things. Thank you for your input today, sir.
I thank you very much, and I assume it's safe for me to close off, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our next endeavor is a panel on approaches to including pregnant women in COVID-19 clinical trials. We have 4 speakers and also have a couple of other experts that will be on the line to help with answering questions. We're going to start with Dr. Sasha Ellington from CDC. Dr. Ellington is an epidemiologist at CDC and co-lead on the COVID-19 response pregnancy and infant linked outcomes team. She'll be followed by Dr. Ruth Faden from Johns Hopkins. Dr. Faden is the Philip Franklin Wagley Professor of Biomedical Ethics and the founding director of the Johns Hopkins Bermans Institute. Next will be Dr. Jeff Roberts from Food and Drug Administration, where he's Associate Director for Scientific Affairs in the Office of Vaccines Research and Review. Then Dr. Linda Eckert from the University of Washington and representing the American College of OBGYN. She's professor of OBGYN at the University of Washington. And then Dr. Dana Meany-Dellum from CDC will be on the line to answer questions. She's the co-lead of the Vaccine Task Force in COVID-19 response. And Dr. Titi Oduyubu from CDC, who's medical officer in the CDC COVID-19 response. I want to thank all of you for your participation in our committee meeting and to help us with our deliberations. I'll now turn the floor over to Dr. Ellington.
Hi, can you hear me?
I hear you, Dr. Ellington.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sasha Ellington. I'm an epidemiologist with the Pregnancy and Infant Linked Outcomes team on CDC's COVID-19 response. I'm going to provide a brief update on the epidemiology of COVID-19 in pregnancy and CDC's surveillance activities. Next slide, please.
And we're going to take another quick 2-minute break right here for you on News Now from Fox.
There are physiologic changes in pregnancy that could increase the risk of severe respiratory viral illness in pregnant women. And these include, but are not limited to, increased heart rate and oxygen consumption, decreased lung capacity, and the shift away from cell-mediated immunity. Severe disease has been associated with other viral respiratory infections during pregnancy, such as with influenza. Next slide. A living systematic review and meta-analysis published in September synthesizes the literature on COVID-19 and pregnancy fairly well. The review sought to identify risk factors for severe COVID-19 illness during pregnancy and delivery and to report on the adverse outcomes among mothers and infants. Differences in clinical manifestations of the disease in pregnant versus similarly aged non-pregnant women with COVID-19 were detected. Specifically, fever and myalgia were less common among pregnant women. Although based on a limited number of studies included for meta-analysis, authors reported an increased likelihood of admission to intensive care unit and a need for invasive ventilation among pregnant women compared with non-pregnant women with COVID-19. These associations were stronger when comparing pregnant women with COVID-19 to pregnant women without COVID-19, especially for admission to the intensive care unit. Mortality due to COVID-19 was low among pregnant women. The study also showed that pregnant women might have a higher odds of preterm birth, and that neonates born to women with COVID-19 may have a higher odds of admission to a neonatal intensive care unit. Lastly, findings from the systematic review showed that risk factors for severe COVID-19 during pregnancy included older maternal age, high body mass index, and underlying medical conditions like chronic hypertension and pre-existing diabetes. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to review several recent CDC analyses and publications. In late September, a pair of MMWR reports were released which examined outcomes among hospitalized pregnant women. The first report on the left side of this slide is from the COVID-19 Associated Hospitalization Surveillance Network, or COVIDNet, which conducts population-based surveillance for laboratory-confirmed COVID-19 associated hospitalizations in 14 states, and it encompasses 99 counties. From March 1st to August 22nd, among nearly 600 hospitalized pregnant women with COVID-19, just under half were symptomatic. Among the symptomatic women, 16% were admitted to intensive care and 8% required invasive mechanical ventilation. Among completed pregnancies, 99% resulted in live birth and 1% in pregnancy loss. Of pregnant women who delivered a live birth during a COVID-19 associated hospitalization,
those were just some of the updates that we were getting from Health and Human Services there on the latest with the COVID-19 vaccine rollouts there. I do want to show you a live look right now in San Francisco because we do have some breaking news regarding, now we do know who will be replacing Senator Kamala Harris when she takes over as vice president come 2021. Governor Gavin Newsom selecting the California Secretary of State Alex Padilla as California's next United States Senator. A former Los Angeles City Councilman and state senator, Padilla has been elected twice statewide as California's Secretary of State, becoming the first Latino to hold the office. Secretary of State Padilla will be now getting this special U.S. Senate seat there for 2 years before an election there. So that is the update there from California. Wanted to pass that along to you, always providing you always the very latest news and updates from across the country as we do get them. Live look right now at how the market is doing, just down about 100 points there in the red. We will continue to always take a look out for you right here on News Now from Fox, and we do have to take another break right here, live right here on News Now from Fox. And going to another live event right now here for you on News Now from Fox, taking out to Philadelphia, getting the latest updates there in the city on the COVID-19 crisis.
Surpass 1,000 or even get to 1,200 or 1,500, in which case our hospitals really might be overwhelmed. Since our case counts have been falling, though, this number has first stabilized. In the past few days, it's actually falling as well. So evidence that the restrictions we put in place have had this effect on limiting the potential risk to the hospitals. So with that in place, though, still there are many reasons for us to be worried. In Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania and the U.S. as a whole, case counts and death rates are still near record highs. There are models that can say that if we were to ease back on all of our restrictions now, it could lead to some 9,000 additional deaths in the state of Pennsylvania before April 1st. And if that increase was proportional, that would mean 800 additional unnecessary deaths in Philadelphia before April 1st. Now, we've seen that holiday gatherings can cause a big increase in daily case counts. We saw a small increase after Halloween and a very, very big increase after Thanksgiving. You see that holiday effect can last. People who are infected over holidays then pass it on to others, who then pass it on to others. The Thanksgiving spike lasted about 10 days. And the case counts are still likely higher than they would have been if we didn't have the Thanksgiving spike. So we're hopeful that case rates will fall for the next week. But we do have big holidays coming up. We have Christmas and we have New Year's. We'll begin to see the effect of Christmas in the last few days of December. We'll begin to see the effect of New Year's on about January 5th. These two spikes will likely run together and unfortunately may feed off of each other. We won't likely see the end of them until about January 15th. Now, currently, the safer-at-home restrictions in Philadelphia are set to expire on January 1st. As of now, the state restrictions are scheduled to end on January 4th. Based on the data and the spikes following the holidays, we believe it's too risky to end all of our current restrictions on either January 1st or January 4th. We need to get past that spike before it's safe to back off. Now, businesses in the past have asked us that we give them adequate notice before changing our restrictions so that they can plan. That's a fair request. So we're announcing today a change in the expiration date. We will maintain the current restrictions for the riskiest settings through January 15th. By riskiest settings, I mean indoor dining at restaurants, indoor gatherings and events, theaters, casinos, colleges for in-person education, and indoor organized sports. It's based on these activities, number one, being indoors, number two, involving either large numbers of people or long periods of time with those people together, or people not wearing masks, or more than one of those. Now, if the case rates don't rise more than we expect them to rise, we will still allow the somewhat less risky settings to restart when the governor's restrictions expire on January 4th, or later if the governor were to extend those restrictions. That means allowing museums, outdoor sports, gyms, high schools for in-person learning and outdoor catered events to start on January 4th. But the restrictions on how they, there would still be restrictions on how they operate. Those restrictions would remain in place for all of those. Most important for all indoor activities, including gyms, masks would have to be worn at all times. And in general, for indoor activities, our density has to be less than 5 persons per 1,000 square feet. Now, let me go back to restaurants for a minute. We know this is extremely difficult, and this is through no fault of the restaurant owners. But the nature of the situation simply makes that inherently risky. As the pandemic has unfolded, we see more evidence that the virus spreads through airborne routes. We're less concerned than we were earlier on about spread through objects and surfaces, but we're more concerned about spread through the air. Now, they're both good and bad aspects of this. One thing is clear is that even a 6-foot distance is not enough if ventilation is not good and people are not wearing masks. But when there are high levels of ventilation, the risk can be greatly reduced. That's why the experience has been that outdoors is much safer than indoors. People getting together indoors when they're not eating, and because they're eating not wearing masks, is the riskiest setting of all. And that risk is going to remain until the vaccine makes this epidemic go away. So we're working with the restaurant industry to reduce that risk. Outdoor dining is continuing, and we're focusing now on improving ventilation indoors to reduce the risk of airborne spread indoors. We want to see if there's a way we can assist restaurants citywide in meeting a very high standard for ventilation, and then verify that they're meeting them, and provide funding for the cost of meeting them. Now, we haven't put that in place yet, but we hope to have that in place by mid-January. In the meantime, the city is providing funding for restaurants. We understand that funding is very limited. It's not as much as the restaurants are losing by any means, but it's what the city can do right now. Then there's the federal relief funding for businesses that was now passed. I don't know the details yet, but I'm hoping that there is significant relief in there for restaurants. So that's with restaurants. What about individual people in Philadelphia now? What should they do? Well, remember, this is still a very high-risk period, and we have the holidays coming up. So no indoor gatherings, no indoor dining, no indoor sports, gyms, museums, libraries right now. If you do want to get together with other people, do it outside with everybody wearing masks. We're asking everyone to follow these recommendations. We can't afford to have more case spikes like that Thanksgiving spike. Don't travel over the holidays. Celebrate your holidays with your immediate household members only, the people you live with every single day, not with relatives and friends who don't live with you. It doesn't matter if you've been tested and they've been tested. It's still not safe for you to get together with people outside of your household. We know that's really difficult during this holiday season. That goes against all of our traditions, but we don't want to pass on COVID. You don't want to pass on COVID to your grandmother. Don't make that mistake when we're so close to the finish line now. More information on all that we've talked about here is at our website, www.phila.gov/COVID. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Farley. We are going to move to Armando, but first I wanted to note for the reporters who are logged in that we are putting into the chat the restrictions, language on the restrictions that Dr. Farley just spelled out. And now we go to Armando for the Spanish language translation of the mayor's and Dr. Farley's comments.
And with that, we will be taking another quick 2-minute break for you right here on News Now from Fox. Everybody, we did want to play this out. I did bring this to you just as it was happening there with the update there as the California Governor Gavin Newsom making history there, appointing Alex Padilla, their Secretary of State, to U.S. Senator.
You there, man?
There we go.
By the way, my kids are jumping up and down in the back.
Ditto. They are 13, 7, and 5.
Yeah, forget about it.
All boys. So roughhousing.
Hey, and just remind me, because I remember I was just thinking, it's a hell of a time when you want to pick up the phone and call your mom or dad. I mean, we're all, this has been a hell of a time. But you lost your mom, a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, 2 years ago. So,
and where your mom and dad came from, remind me, they literally came both from Mexico.
Yeah, no, it's a story I'm proud of. They actually came separately. They met in Los Angeles. But they fell in love and applied for green cards.
Can you imagine what mom would be thinking now as I ask you if you want to be the next U.S. Senator of the United States, the great state of California?
You serious?
This is the ask, brother.
I'm honored, man. And I'm humbled because of them. I can't tell you how many pancakes my dad flipped or eggs he scrambled, trying to provide for us in the many, many years of my mom cleaning houses, doing the same thing. So I try so hard to make sure that our democracy is as inclusive in California as we built, and to have an important perspective to bring to Washington.
You're going to have that chance, Alex. I'm honored. You got to say yes, though, man.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you, and please know I will make you proud and make California proud by getting it done in the U.S. Senate. We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm ready.
There it was. That was history in the making right there. We continue to always bring you the very latest here on News Now from Fox. Let's keep up the live events going. Take you out to Detroit here, getting a COVID-19 update from Detroit.
And so it gives us a little bit of an ability to plan ahead, but not a large amount to plan ahead. And so, you know, it's a bit of a logistics Rubik's Cube for us.
Appreciating this next question, maybe we don't know yet, but when we read about mutations of this virus, I'm curious the opinions of anyone here in regard to how effective this may be and whether that creates a concern moving forward about the effectiveness of what we're now using as the vaccine, or you know, how that may play, if at all, into what we're doing.
Sure, and there's been a lot of discussion on this topic as people have seen the headlines about some of the mutations, and so far, one thing we understand is that all viruses mutate. Common cold viruses, all the viruses that we've all experienced as causing illness over the years. And that so far it looks as though the vaccines are providing protection based on how they were developed, and that a lot of mutations aren't going to affect that. But no one really knows what the future holds, and it could well be just like we get a newly formulated flu vaccine every year or every couple years, depending on what's happening in the community, that something like that may need to happen for this. And that's why there's ongoing research keeping very close track of the virus. Our own state lab does genetic typing on the virus samples that we send them, and that's the key. We don't give up the fight. We've got to stay focused on the science behind these viruses.
Thank you. The last one I have, Mayor, is back to those who choose maybe not to get vaccinated. You're setting the example. Some have, not to digress here, but some have looked at public officials who have opposed or downplayed the risk getting vaccinated as hypocritical. You all have pretty consistent with your messaging throughout. But when you talk about setting an example, I don't know if you've heard from a lot of folks who are frontliners that don't want it, or if you can elaborate or give a little more context into weighing into the decision of, obviously it's voluntary, but trying to encourage them, but yet respecting their personal choices.
You know, I've talked to a number of firefighters who have said, I know it's the right thing to do, but we're the very first. And that is a different level. And I had enough conversations to know that if I get the vaccine early, and all of us made the same decision, some people will criticize us for getting it early, but if I don't get it and it causes a number of other people not to get it and somebody gets sick and dies, that'll be a lot harder to live with. And so I just made the decision that I'm going to get criticized no matter what I do. If getting the vaccine early causes more of our employees and ultimately more Detroiters to get it, the criticism will be okay. And I don't know if Wright or Audrey want to talk about it, but they're making exactly the same decision at their places.
It is the same decision, but what we do in the interim, and I'm sure Wright is doing the same thing, for those who are resistant or concerned, we spend a lot of time educating, and we have various levels of staff. Just some are immersed in the science, some are not, and so we spend a lot of our time educating. We do a lot of group education. I do a lot of one-on-one education, or medical staff. They spend a lot of time educating, and really it's about getting people comfortable around the science. Part of why it is not mandatory is for that reason. It's that people are still working through not just where their heads are, but also where their hearts are. It's so novel, and it's in its own novelty frightening. And so I encourage my team. I think what I say to my group of leaders, that this is one of those times that there will be no vaccine bullying. And I think as leaders, it's important for us in this case, as always, but more importantly now, to lead with empathy and compassion, and to be a part of helping people to get educated around the science and what this all means.
So I certainly concur with what Audrey just said. And it would tell you that thus far we have about an 80% acceptance rate within team members of Henry Ford. But I've talked with a number of frontline team members, some working in our corporate office, who said to me, Mr. Lassiter, I don't know about this vaccine. And I said, well, next Tuesday I'm going to get the vaccine with Mayor Duggan and several other leaders, and we think it's important to. And they said, you're going to get it? And I said, I'm going to get it, and I would tell you that it's safe. And so we are trying to communicate on various levels with our staff. We put out several versions of FAQs for people to understand it. We launched our own internal committee of scientists and researchers and ethicists to evaluate all the public data once it came out, as well as to establish policies for our team members. Similar to what you heard from Audrey, we are not mandating it, and we're also not bullying people to do it. And so our hope is that as they see more of their colleagues getting it, as there's more information out in the public, as you begin hearing about it from folks who don't look like us and don't do what we do, but folks in the church and folks in the community that can translate for people in ways that make them more comfortable. My sense is that we'll continue to get pretty strong uptake, particularly by those folks who are more inclined to be concerned early on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor, we have a few questions from reporters who are watching remotely. Sarah Rahal and Jamie Edmonds from, Sarah Rahal from the Detroit News and Jamie Edmonds from Channel 4 both wanted to know if they're clear that the vaccine is not being mandated today, but if there is not a lot of buy-in.
No, we have no intention of mandating. I don't think the vaccine should be mandated, and the city of Detroit certainly will not be mandating the vaccine. I can't imagine anybody else will either.
We will not.
Right. No. And if there is a low participation, how do you expect that you would get those numbers up?
So the thought of failure doesn't really cross our minds. So we're starting with this. This is our step, and I'm hoping that leading by example will drive this. And, our health workers have seen what COVID has done to this community. A lot of folks in this town lost family members, and we all remember that drive through Belle Isle when it really hit us the magnitude. So I think people know what's at stake, and we're approaching this positively. As Dr. Gregory said, we're approaching it with empathy, understanding. Our firefighters, when they come in tomorrow, will have Henry Ford medical staff taking them through the science behind this and helping them make informed decisions. Nobody's going to be bullied, but you're going to have positive messages. I think positive messages will win out. That's what I believe.
Okay. One quick follow-up from Sarah. Not sure if it was mentioned how many Moderna doses the city received?
Received 2,000.
2,000? Okay. One cleanup question from previous briefings is business enforcement on COVID safety requirements, and wanted to know if where we're at on numbers right now and if those businesses' names will be made public at some point.
I promised the last briefing that we would go back and look at that. I thought it was a reasonable request that we make the enforcement public, and our Director Fair can tell you exactly what we're doing so everybody can see what the enforcement's been.
Sure. We are continuing to enforce. My teams are spending a lot of time on the weekend, throughout the week, following up on all the investigations. And so about 30 days ago, the mayor and I announced a call-in line for residents to report violators. And we have heard. We've heard from our residents. We've had over 400 complaints, and that has resulted in multiple tickets. It's available right now on our website on the COVID-19 dashboard. It lists all of the businesses over the last 30 days that have had tickets or closures. We want to be transparent in this process while also holding the owners accountable.
Okay. So you can find it on our website now, all the information.
Great. One final question. This is from Eli Newman at WDET. He says the Congress's coronavirus relief package includes $638 million to carry out a low-income household drinking water and wastewater emergency assistance program. Mayor, do you have any idea how that would be enacted in Detroit, and if it helps with your 2022 shutoff?
So our team is looking at the details right now. There's that provision. There's a transit provision. There are vaccine distribution provisions. There are multiple provisions of the new CARES Act that will be affecting the city of Detroit, and I've got a team analyzing all of them right now, and we'll have more understanding of that in the next day or two, how much flows down to the city versus how much is administered by somebody else.
Okay. That's the last question, so we can
We'll go get our
transition
shots.
now to getting vaccinations.
All right.
All right, now the Detroit city leaders will be getting their vaccinations, and we've been seeing a lot of this throughout the day right here on News Now from Fox. We'll continue to see it as more of the vaccines will become available. You're watching News Now from Fox, always with us trying to bring you the live events that are happening. Now we are going to go out. Let's go back out to Philadelphia. We're getting into that COVID-19 news conference still right now.
Certain things implemented?
Well, we hope to deliver as much vaccine as comes to us. I estimated that by the mid-January, we'd be probably over 100,000 people vaccinated. Unfortunately, that's still a very small fraction of the city of 1.6 million people. And the same group that models the effects of different implications, different interventions on the epidemic, modeled what happened if you accelerated the vaccination program. It really didn't have that much impact on the number of deaths. It's simply that this epidemic wave is occurring too early and the vaccine is coming out too slowly. So that's why we're relying so much on restrictions now. The vaccine will ultimately reduce the number of people dying, but certainly not in the next few weeks and maybe not in the next couple of months.
In terms of the stimulus, sir, how much money is the health department going to get for vaccine distribution, and do you think it's enough?
I don't know the answer to that. We're very eager to find out.
I know you needed some money.
I don't know if Rob wanted to weigh in. We have Finance Director Rob Dubow here.
Yeah, it's too early to tell. It's a multi-thousand-page piece of legislation, so we'll work through it. We know that there is money nationwide for vaccination and contact tracing. It'll be a little while before we know how much comes here.
And Mr. Mayor, one quick question for you. Do you have any idea at this point how many businesses have closed citywide since March, and what exactly the ramifications and lost taxes are?
Well, the ramifications are going to be severe. I don't have the number. We don't know exactly how many, because those who have closed, we don't know if they're going to reopen or not. So I don't know whether Commerce or Finance has any more information, but I don't think we'll really know until we start getting back to normal and see who reopens.
And Mcchrystal has joined us, the Commerce Director.
That's correct, Mayor. You just don't know.
And I can tell you about the impact on revenues. Our initial projections and what we built our budget on were that we would lose $750 million in tax revenues by the end of this June. So far, those projections are looking like they're accurate, although the numbers could get worse if the economy doesn't pick up between now and the end of the year.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mitch. Let's go now to Alicia Reed of CBS3.
I have two questions. One is about coronavirus and the other one is about mummers. Do I ask the first one and then come back later for mummers?
Why don't we just try to squeeze them both in, since obviously the mummers were impacted by COVID. That is certainly related to this topic. So go ahead with both. Yeah.
So my first question is for Dr. Farley. So people are being urged to stay home for Christmas and New Year's, but if they decide to do exactly what they did, back on Thanksgiving and the numbers skyrocket, do hospitals have enough beds, workers, all of that to accommodate a spike in cases?
Well, there is some availability in the system right now. As you saw in that graph I just showed, we're about 800 people in the hospital. We can handle 1,000. I'm not sure if we can handle 1,200 or 1,500. I'm hopeful that the spike will not be that big, but I can't guarantee that if we have a huge spike that we might not have a problem in hospitals.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Farley. And this one is for Mayor Kenney. Some people are saying that they're still going to march down 2nd Street on New Year's Day. They're not calling it a parade, they're calling it a protest. And so right now it seems, I think there are about 2,600 people that have signed up to attend this protest. And so how is the city going to address this alleged protest come New Year's Day?
Well, it's important to remember that the bulk of the mummers and the organized groups made it clear that they weren't going to march this year because of health concerns. So, the major divisions of the parade who are organized made that decision early on. The people who decided they want to protest or march/protest, we'll try to keep them safe as we possibly can. Listen, I mean, I was in Mummers Parade for over 30 years. It's part of my tradition in life growing up, and I'm disappointed that they're not going to have it either. But it's not more important than your health and your life. So, I mean, I would urge people not to do it. We will certainly have whatever police around to keep people safe. We would urge them not to go out there and put themselves at risk and their families at risk, for 1 year. I mean, we can hopefully, if we get this under control, come back better next year and have a real good celebration. But certainly people have a right to protest, and we'll try to keep them safe. Just if they would wear a mask, that would be helpful, and not kind of breathe all over each other would be also helpful. But we'll see what happens on New Year's Day, and we hope everybody's safe. That's the only thing I am concerned about as mayor, and I know everybody else on this call is concerned about, is keeping people from getting sick and dying.
And the folks that do plan on protesting, they have whatever paperwork they need to do that protest?
No, we're not issuing any permits. We never issue permits for a protest. The protests back during the late May, early June were spontaneous protests based on outrage over what was happening in the country. They were not permitted, but they were not physically permitted, but they were allowed, and we try to keep people as safe as possible. Regrettably, some folks out there during that period of time was doing damage and breaking things up, but that was not everybody out there was doing that. Most of the people out there were protesting for understandable reasons. And if people want to protest New Year's Day, it's certainly their right to do so, and we'll try to keep everybody safe and orderly.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alicia. Let's go now to David Belandra of Philly Sports Network.
My question is for Dr. Farley. How would you sense how have all the college and the pro teams have handled so far with all the restrictions and followed all the guidelines you guys have presented to them?
In general, I think that they followed they have good safety standards, and in general, they appear to follow those standards and have done fairly well. It hasn't been perfect, but in general, I think they've done fairly well.
My follow-up for you would be is, with these new things you implemented until January 15th, that includes indoor sports events, the NHL season is supposed to start January 13th, the NBA season starts tonight. Are you saying for now, nobody in the arena as for spectators?
Correct, no spectators. Now, those sporting events are allowed to take place. We have exceptions for professional sports where they send us individual safety protocols. We negotiate them and we approve them. So the sports can take place, but no spectators.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, David. Let's go now to Laura Mcchrystal of the Inquirer.
Hi. Dr. Farley, I'm wondering how you decided which events or which activities will be able to resume January 4th versus the 15th. I know you mentioned indoor dining is especially risky, but for example, like the difference between theaters and museums, how did you make those distinctions?
Difference between what and museums?
I believe you had theaters cannot reopen, but museums can.
Yeah. So we looked at several factors. We looked at the number of people involved, whether it's indoors or outdoors, whether people are likely to be wearing masks, and the amount of time that they're together, and whether there's evidence of from elsewhere or here of outbreaks in those settings. Museums, I'm not aware there's evidence of the outbreaks. You can have pretty low density in museums. People can certainly wear masks in museums. They are indoors, so there is definitely some risk there. But theaters, there definitely have been outbreaks that have occurred in theaters. There tend to be more people. They're a long period of time, and so they're higher risk. Wherever you draw the line, there's going to be ones close to the line where you question whether that's the right judgment. But we try to be as objective as possible in determining what were the riskier ones.
Okay. And at what point would you determine, you had mentioned that you may need to change course if the spike is bigger than expected. At what point would you make that determination prior to January 4th?
I can't say today on that. I think the point here is the epidemic continues to surprise us. There's so much that we are going to have to always act on in the future based on information in the future that nothing is a guarantee. So I'm hopeful that those activities that we have listed will be able to open on January 4th. And that's even taking into account the fact that we expect some increase for Christmas and New Year's. But I'm hopeful that we can still do that. But the riskier ones, we want to postpone those until January 15th. Even the fact that we're going down now doesn't make us comfortable because we do expect that spike.
Okay, and my last question, the large number of deaths that you reported today, I know they're delivered in batches, but I'm wondering, is that kind of on track with what you've been expecting? I think last week you said you expected to reach 100 deaths a week by the end of the year.
That is about on track with what I'm expecting, unfortunately. I'm hopeful that we can keep them under 100 per week. We didn't get many reports during the week, so that 82 represents about a week's worth. So that's under 100. We'll see where we go from here. When we made our restrictions, I was concerned that it'd be over 200 per week. So if we can keep them up under 100 per week, that's still way too many, but that is real progress.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Let's go to Isabel Sanchez of Telemundo.
Hello. Armando, estos permisos para que los restaurantes estén ofreciendo el servicio.
And we will be taking another 2-minute break right here for you. News Now from Fox.
Poder ofrecer el servicio.
The question is probably directed to Commissioner Farley. These permits for restaurants to offer open-air service, are they going to be extended? What would restaurants have to do in order to get those done?
So restaurants are allowed to have outdoor dining now, and they will continue to be allowed to have outdoor dining. Is that the question?
Y si esa es la pregunta sobre si los restaurantes van a continuar con el permiso para poder ofrecer comidas al aire libre.
Sí, pero sé que la ciudad requería algunos permisos para ellos estar en parte de las calles o cerrar parte de las aceras. A eso es lo que me refiero.
Then the question may be best for the mayor. Our colleague is asking about the permits that the restaurants are required from the city in order to offer service that it's outdoors, curbside, or taking over some of the sidewalks. The permit issue is the question.
Permit, I don't understand the question.
I think so. Hey, Kumar might be the best to answer that.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, Armando. The restaurant would have to contact our Department of License and Inspections, and it's a work group. It's an interdepartmental work group, including License and Inspections, Commerce Department, and Streets Departments that work on approving those permits. So they would just need to contact one of those departments to get that started.
Tomar Alexander nos dice que hay un grupo de trabajo, Isabel, que está constituido por gente del Departamento de Comercio, de calles, para aprobar estos permisos, y que lo que los restaurantes tienen que hacer es contactar a la Oficina de Licencias e Inspecciones para obtener estos permisos para ofrecer servicio al aire libre.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Isabel, you all set?
Yep, that was all on my list.
Very good. All right. We are now going to go to Martin Pratt, and after Martin, we can open the floor for a few minutes for a second round of questions. Martin Pratt of Philly YBN. You're up.
Thank you. Dr. Farley, I know a lot of us are facing COVID fatigue. What are recommendations you have for Philadelphians to stay alert, still deal with what we have to face, wearing masks, washing your hands, but also all this information that's coming out almost on a daily basis? Are there any suggestions you have to go to one website or two websites that can kind of decrease the stress that we're all feeling?
Obviously go to our website where we really try to provide the most objective information and guidance on that. In general, I would go to health department websites, both the CDC, the state health department, our health department. I'm saying in general, I think the media has done an excellent job of reporting this objectively. Now, I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to social media personally. because then you have a lot of conspiracy theories and things that's information that's inaccurate. But in general, the media's been pretty accurate. As far as sort of how to psychologically survive through this, I would just point out it's okay for people to go outside. You don't need to hide inside. Outside, there's a lot of ventilation, and so you can get out there and you can exercise. You can be with people that you want to visit with, your relatives and your friends, as long as you're outside and wearing a mask. And I think that'll help psychologically for people feeling cooped up. And also knowing that we're not too far from the end of this, that the end is in sight. That might help people be able to hang in there just a little bit longer with restrictions.
A last question for you, Dr. Farley. Has there been any advances that your office is aware of or is happy to share with actually cleaning the air from, as you mentioned earlier, the most concern we have with restaurants is the droplets in the air?
Well, we do think that the droplets in the air are a risk, and that a better heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, HVAC system, that circulates more air, that has more outside air mixed in it, and that has a filter in it, can help reduce that risk. And we're going to try to make more specifics around that general principle for the restaurants to go with that'll reduce the risk at all indoor restaurants.
Thank you. I'm done.
All right, thank you, Martin. Let's go back to David Melandra of Philly Sports Network.
Dr. Farley, this is a follow-up for one of my other questions for you. Is the small time when there were fans allowed in for the Eagles games and for the soccer games down in Chester, during your contact tracing, were there any relation to the cases rising from the fans being in the stadiums, because those are outdoor stadiums?
We definitely had instances in which we identified people who had the infection and were their infectious period. They were at the stadium, or people who were at the stadium during the time they might have been exposed. But it's really hard to tell whether they actually transmitted at the stadium. In general, outdoors is less risky than indoors. I'm hopeful. Now it's getting close to the end of football season, but I'm hopeful in the not too distant future we can allow people to be at outdoor stadiums.
So what's it going to take from the city side to sign off on allowing, say, example, for the Philly season is going to start up in April. There have been talks about the NHL looking to move more home games from indoor arenas to outdoors. What's it going to take, say, have the Philadelphia Flyers approach to you about moving some of their home games to outdoors?
They have not approached me that I'm aware of. I would be enthusiastic about that. I do think that the risk is much less outdoors. And so I'm hopeful for the upcoming baseball season. And if the Flyers can figure out how to do it outdoors, that would be great.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. And seeing no further questions, this concludes our press conference for today. A reminder, as we announced earlier, we will not be doing a larger...
All right, that was the update in Philadelphia. We continue to always bring you the latest here on NewsNOW from Fox. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Looks like a little bit later we'll be getting an update in Delaware, but I want to now show you New York City's update. We showed this to you a little bit earlier in the morning on NewsNowFox.com, but we want to show it to you more in its entirety right here.
For now 7 years, we put the most aggressive approach in this country into place to save the lives of pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. And Vision Zero has worked, and Vision Zero is powerful because it changes behavior, it changes minds, it changes laws, it does so many things, changes the way that our streets look and feel and their safety. There are so many parts of Vision Zero, and I believe in it, but we have to go farther because we know there's still too many people in danger. There's still lives that are being lost that should not be lost. So this year we've seen a very, very painful reality, and obviously the coronavirus, the number one challenge, has thrown off everything else. Now, one thing that is true and is a very good thing amidst this very painful year is that for pedestrians, this has been our safest year. 2020 has actually been our safest year for pedestrians, but not for motorists and cyclists. There have been too many crashes. In fact, we've seen that rate go up in alarming fashion. We have to do some different things right away to address this situation. So we have new Vision Zero initiatives we're launching. Some will be done by the city. Some will need the help of the state of New York. And we're appealing today to New York State, to the legislature, to help us do more, to help us save lives. Help us with the most fundamental step, which is taking what works. Speed cameras, they work. And let me say, anyone who hears the word speed cameras and they immediately don't like that, they don't like to hear those words, speed cameras, remind them of tickets they get. I can sympathize. I've said it before. I've had moments as a driver where I wasn't careful enough and I got one of those speeding tickets and no one likes it. But you know what? They change behavior. They get people to start slowing down. They get people to obey the law. They work. And we need more because we need to save lives. What we need is for New York State to allow New York City to operate speed cameras 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We still have too many restrictions holding us back from saving lives. And these restrictions don't make sense. Remember, most basic fact in the world, if you're not speeding, you're not going to get a ticket. Let me say again, if you're not speeding, you're not going to get a ticket. If you're not speeding, you have nothing to worry about from a speed camera. So extending them to greater hours only makes sense, particularly the overnight hours where we've seen, unfortunately, some really horrible moments and people's lives lost. We're also going to be cracking down through the police department on drunk driving, which we know is a challenge in every holiday season. We're really worried about this season with such a horrible year people have been through. So you're going to see NYPD out in force addressing drunk driving and making sure people understand there are real consequences. But when it comes to the speed cameras, I want to just make sure people understand this. And these facts speak volumes. 3/4 of traffic fatalities this year happen in times or places where no automated speed enforcement is currently allowed under state law. So right there's a problem. And over 1/3 of the non-highway fatalities occurred in school camera zones during hours when the cameras could not issue tickets. So think about that. In those school zones, we fought hard to get those cameras in the school zones. They work. They've saved the lives of kids and parents and grandparents. They work. But even in those school zones, we're seeing people's lives lost because we can't operate those cameras enough of the day. Doesn't make sense. It's time to change the law. We know there are colleagues in Albany ready to lead the charge, and we thank all of them. This is about saving lives. So I want to ask everyone to support this crucial Vision Zero initiative. Let's use the speed cameras to the maximum to save lives. Okay, one more quick point before I do our indicators. Just a update for people in the Bronx today, that there is a special election today in the Bronx, an open seat for the City Council in District 12. Now that includes neighborhoods of Baychester, Co-op City, Edenwald, Eastchester, Wakefield, and Williamsbridge. Polls are open. They've been open since 6 a.m. They will be open till 9 p.m. So it's a special election. It's important for the community to be represented. And even though we know it's not the same focus and energy of a typical election day, I still want to reflect on how just weeks ago New Yorkers came out in droves to make their views and voices heard. So I'm asking folks in the 12th Council District in the Bronx, come out, make your voice heard, make sure you are represented. Polls open till 9 o'clock today. All right, let's go over our indicators. Number one, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19. Today's report, 193 patients. We want to be under 200. We're barely under 200. But again, the hospitalization rate per 100,000 is a problem, 3.09 per 100,000. We want to be under 2. So again, that number is too high. Case numbers continue to be astoundingly high. Today's number on 7-day average, 2,889 against a goal of 550. It speaks for itself. We have a lot of work to do. We've got to bring that down. And now the third indicator, percentage of New York City residents testing positive, 7-day rolling average today, 5.88%. We want to be under 5% even. We have real work to do, 5.88%. A little lower than yesterday, but still higher than we need to be. few words in Spanish. Lo único que nos va a dar de nuevo la oportunidad de tener una vida diaria normal es la vacuna. Por eso, todos debemos tomar la vacuna que es segura y efectiva y convencer a nuestros familiares y amigos a hacer lo mismo. La ciudad más grande de América va a ser más fuerte si todos take loved ones. But let's say someone says, no, I'm traveling no matter what. Okay? Then I say to them, you've got two choices. One, when you travel, of course, you have to maintain social distancing with people around you, wear your mask, do all the things we normally tell you to do. But if you're going to come back and expect to go on with your regular life, that's not going to happen unless you do exactly what the state rules say, and you test while you're away and test negative and come back, and within the stipulated period of time, test again and test negative. That's the only way you're not doing a quarantine. And right now that's a 2-week quarantine. And we will enforce that quarantine. We'll follow up with every traveler about their quarantine. We expect them to honor the quarantine. We'll help them. But if they don't honor the quarantine, there are serious financial penalties. And we need people to understand that. We're not doing this for the fun of it. We're doing this to save lives.
All right, everybody, we are going out live to another event here on News Now from Fox, taking it out to Georgia, where we are going to be getting some updates on the vaccines there.
So, Governor Kemp, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being with us today. I also want to continue to thank Dr. Toomey and her team at the Georgia Public Health Commissioner's Office and all the hard-working public health folks all across the state. And I want to thank Dr. Lewin and the whole team at Emory for hosting us today, and really appreciate all the hard work that they are doing. Dr. Lewin was just letting me know how quickly they're deploying the vaccine, which is very exciting news, and we're hearing that all over the state. I'm going to have just very brief remarks today so Dr. Toomey can provide an update on where we are on the vaccine rollout, and our experts can talk more about the Moderna vaccine the state is set to receive this week. Let me just again reiterate my gratitude to the Trump administration, Operation Warp Speed, and really a lot of healthcare experts, public and private, that have partnered to roll up their sleeves on the vaccine development, deployment, all the testing and everything else to get this approved so quickly yet so safely. As I said the other day, we are seeing a miracle of modern science happen right before our eyes, and it is well needed, I will tell you. We're certainly excited to be receiving 174,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine this week. Dr. Toomey can speak to more specifics, but I can tell you this. This vaccine will be easier to deploy and store, and it will be going to hundreds of public health sites, hospitals, pharmacies, and clinics all across the state to inoculate those healthcare workers under the Phase 1A program. As I said last week, these vaccines are safe, they're very effective, and we are working nonstop to get them out to our fellow Georgians following the CDC guidance. We are also eager for our long-term care facility residents and staff to start receiving the vaccine. We expect that will begin next Monday, December the 28th. And before I turn it over to Dr. Toomey and Dr. Rufael, I want to give a quick update on where we are in the fight against COVID headed into the holidays. As you all know, we've continued to see our numbers increase over the last few weeks in every metric as we have seen. And we continue to ask Georgians to do their part to help us stop the spread. Wear your masks, practice social distancing, follow the public health guidance that we have out there that's outlined in our executive orders, and continue to use good hand hygiene. This guidance has been in place for months now, and it has proven to be effective in slowing the spread of the virus, and we especially know that coming into the holiday weekends. We continue to be in regular contact with our hospitals, CEOs like Dr. Lewin here in the metro area, as well as throughout the state, to hear and see what they are seeing on the ground and adjust course if needed. I'm happy to report that on December 30th, I'm happy to report that by December the 30th, we will have an 80-day supply of all PPE on hand, ensuring that we have critical supplies to face the virus head-on in the coming days and weeks. Last week, we talked about the need for additional staff augmentation to ensure our healthcare facilities have enough people to care for Georgians who need them. And we are proud to announce that working along with Speaker Ralston, Lieutenant Governor Duncan, the House and Senate Appropriation Chairman and members, that we will continue the state's commitment to hospitals and nursing homes with staff augmentation, with the initial projections putting us at nearly $70 million additional dollars that will be spent through March 6, 2021. Following the passage of the new stimulus bill, we have more good news on that front. Thanks to the bill's passage and signing by Congress and President Trump and increased flexibility as a result, we're going to be able to add an additional $8 million in staffing support where it is needed most in our hospitals, including here at Emory. We are also taking steps once again to address another need that our hospitals have been telling us about in recent days, and that is capacity. In concert with rising cases and hospitalizations due to COVID as well as other procedures, our hospitals have seen an increased need for bed space to treat other patients. And just as we have before, the state is activating a rapid plan to increase capacity and ensure our hospitals are not overrun. I have authorized the reopening of the Georgia World Congress Center Alternative Care Facility with 60 new beds to assist with patient overflow. We each continue to work with our hospital leadership each day to see what new capacity we can bring online, and we expect that the World Congress Center will be able to accept patients by next week, with operations continuing through the month of January. This is being done again through our partnership with Grady Health System. I want to again thank the folks at the Georgia Coordinating Center for helping us act quickly and alleviate strains on hospitals throughout the state. As we look to Christmas and the rest of the holiday season, I know that many Georgians are anxious to spend time with their loved ones, and believe you me, I am as well. But we are also pleading with Georgians once again to do the right thing and stay vigilant. Do not let your guard down, and choose to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. The threat of the virus is still very real despite the vaccine. The general public will not be able to be vaccinated, as we've said for weeks now, for a couple of months. But in the meantime, Georgians, please help us continue to hunker down to stop the spread. Continue to follow the 4 things that we've been talking about for a very long time. Wear your mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing, and follow the guidance from public health officials. And where possible, please limit your holiday gatherings to just a few people in the same household, or consider gathering virtually. If you have outdoor heaters or other means to bear the weather, which is probably not going to be good on Christmas Day from what I'm seeing, gathering outside or trying to spend time outside is definitely helpful. I'd also like to encourage everyone to continue to take the steps to socially distance yourself from those you don't normally see. I know this is hard, but I know that our brave healthcare heroes, including those right here at Emory, need all of us to do our part to keep the virus at bay while we roll out the vaccine. This long battle, as long as it's been, we know it is coming to an end with this vaccine that we have before us. But that being said, we cannot let up. We have to continue to focus on celebrating safely to get us through the holidays as normal and as quickly as possible, so that we can continue the methodical reopening of our economy and weathering this COVID storm until we get everyone in the state vaccinated. So thank you all for being here with us today, and now Dr. Toomey will provide you with the update.
Thank you so much. And it is particularly a privilege to be here today, not only because of the long history of partnership that we've had between Emory and public health, but also for the fact that the Moderna vaccine was actually tested here, that one of the clinical trials took place here, and we are reaping the benefits of that work. And I'm pleased to say that our first doses of Moderna vaccine, the 174,000 doses that have been allocated are in the process of coming to us, even as we speak here right now. We've gotten our full allocation of the Pfizer vaccine. That's 125,775 doses. Those first allocations went out to facilities that had the ability, in large measure, to use that ultra cold freezer capacity because of the difficulty in maintaining that vaccine. But additional doses have shipped out. And we are also pleased that through our partnership with CVS and Walgreens, 20,000 doses will begin that process. As Governor mentioned, on Monday, we'll start to vaccinate long-term care facilities. We are in ACIP guidelines 1A, that is healthcare workers, all healthcare workers, regardless of where they practice, whether in the community, in the hospital, through public health, or in long-term care facilities, as well as long-term care facility residents, really thought to be among the highest risk individuals in the state. And so we are pleased that we are able to roll that out right now and make that partnership happen, which will touch at least 95% of our long-term care facilities. Public health will be working in partnership with the other facilities that have not enrolled in their program. I also wanted to point out that you may have noticed that that we have currently have a dashboard up on our website that really will allow us to track where we are in terms of vaccine allocation, how many providers we have currently, 746 when I last checked the website. And we will be adding more and more as we move forward, because I think there's more and more interest and more engagement with the provider community. And I'm pleased to say that 246 facilities, both hospitals, provider groups, as well as public health departments and pharmacies, have placed orders and have either received or are in the process of receiving over the next several days or weeks to come additional orders for either the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. And I also want to point out that these providers are in all parts of the state, and these facilities receiving the vaccine are in all parts of the state. The initial tranche of vaccine from Pfizer largely was focused in areas that had the availability to use the ultra-cold freezers, and so there are parts of rural Georgia, including our own public health departments, that weren't able to receive them. With now the Moderna vaccine, we can literally cover the state with vaccinations, and we're very excited to begin that process and continue to roll that out. And so I urge you to follow the dashboard, follow the progress, although there will be a delay. There often is a delay in as long as 24 hours from the time a vaccine is delivered to the time that it appears on the dashboard. But we know that there's a total of 17,500 vaccines administered. And just in talking to Dr. Lewin just now, I'm sure that many of their vaccines already are in the process of being entered, and that number will increase dramatically over the next days and weeks ahead. So let's keep track of that. We can monitor that, but recognize that there will be a 24-hour delay as we move forward. And just finally, the last thing I want to say is to reinforce something that the governor said. Today, we've reported the highest rates we've ever seen in Georgia, highest numbers of new cases. Just because we have a vaccine now, just because we are now actively engaged in important partnerships throughout the state to vaccinate our healthcare workers and highest risk individuals, that will be moving into the broader community, we hope by late January, February. we can't let down our guard. We have to continue to practice those preventive measures that are tried and true because we are seeing rates increase, and we have to stop the spread even before the vaccine becomes fully available to the state as a whole. Thank you again, and thank you in particular to Emory for the partnership and ongoing support for all of our work in COVID, and particularly for their work in the vaccine partnership. And let me turn it over to Dr. Lewin to take it from here.
Thank you, Commissioner Toomey. I want to take this opportunity to thank Governor Kemp and Commissioner Toomey and their teams for their work and dedication in bringing not only the Pfizer vaccine, but also now the Moderna vaccine to the people of Georgia. It's almost cliche at this point, but we are truly navigating through some unprecedented times and challenges. Our ability to work closely with Governor Kemp, Commissioner Toomey, and their teams enables not just our clinicians, but also our researchers and public health experts to extend the reach of this work throughout our state and beyond. The remarkable speed with which we now have a safe and effective COVID vaccine available in our arsenal reflects the cooperation and unyielding perseverance of the diverse teams from our government and our academic communities, along with private industry, all of whom continue their dedication to solve this problem. This too has been unprecedented and is largely why we're able to convene today to recognize the collaboration among our government, research, private industry, and clinical partners to better understand how this vaccine works, how it can be an effective tool in our efforts to fight COVID, but most importantly, why we encourage Georgia citizens to receive it. As my colleague, Dr. Orenstein says, vaccines don't save lives, vaccinations do. So as soon as you have the opportunity to receive the vaccine, please be sure to do that. While we're not yet out of the woods, and as the governor has been encouraging since the spring, we need to continue wearing masks and face coverings, practicing social distancing, washing our hands frequently, and following all of the guidelines from public health experts. And with these actions, we're now finally on the road that will lead us to recovery. The work of our frontline healthcare workers has been remarkable, learning and adapting to new treatment protocols and strategies for managing this new virus, and our researchers have been equally effective in developing what clinicians need to do their jobs. Better testing through our service as a primary National Institutes of Health site to validate new COVID test technologies from across the country. Better treatment options as a leading clinical research site for remdesivir and other new medical therapies, and more effective prevention. Through our work across Emory Healthcare and by our Emory faculty at Grady, at the VA Medical Center, or at Children's, as a research university, our people are working hard to accelerate new knowledge and apply what we are learning to fight this pandemic. Before I turn it over to Dr. Rufiel, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the tremendous support of our community, from those who volunteered to participate in clinical trials, whether vaccine trials or therapeutics, to those who donated supplies, meals, and funds, and of course, to our partners in state and local government. We are tremendously grateful. I'm pleased then to introduce Dr. Nadine Rufiel, professor in the Department of Medicine and lead investigator in the Emory Vaccine Center.
Thank you, Dr. Lewin. I would also like to extend my appreciation to Governor Kemp and Commissioner Toomey for visiting Emory on this very special day. Thanks to effective and safe vaccines, we can begin on the road to recovery from this pandemic. Emory was just the second site in the nation to begin testing for Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. I recall we were enrolling the first subject in the remdesivir research trial when we received a call from the National Institute of Health to start preparing for the implementation of the vaccine trial. The first participant was vaccinated at Emory on March 27 as part of the phase 1. The same month, our state faced local transmission of the virus. In April, Emory was the first in the world to vaccinate an older adult with the mRNA vaccine. The phase 3 for Moderna started in the summer and led to those astonishing results where in just a few months, the vaccine was shown to be safe and 94% effective in preventing symptomatic disease, a true medical breakthrough. Emory enrolled some 700 adult participants in phase 3 of the Moderna trial across 3 clinics, the Hope Clinic, the clinical arm of the Emory Vaccine Center, the Emory Children Clinic under the leadership of Dr. Anderson, and the Grady Clinic under the leadership of Dr. Kelly. At a time where it's important to build trust for COVID vaccine in minority communities, Emory enrolled one of the most diverse clinical trial population in the nation. At the Hope Clinic, 47% of vaccine volunteers were from underrepresented minorities, and at the Grady Clinic, the number was 75%. Emory was able to successfully enroll minority participants by relying on a long history of outreach to at-risk and minority community through HIV vaccine and engaging with the coronavirus prevention network. None of the scientific accomplishment could have been achieved without the support of our community and the dedication of the staff as well as the faculties. Emory is also the home of the Infectious Disease Clinical Research Consortium, that's IDCRC, which is the largest clinical trials network in the Division of Microbiology and Infectious Diseases at NIH, and had been working to accelerate COVID vaccine research. Our journey to this leadership group began several years ago with investment in infectious disease research and faculty and the development of the Emory Vaccine Center. This network of expertise and resources allows us to diversify the approach to prevent, treat, and evaluate infectious disease, not only nationally, but also on a global scale. Our work in this area will continue long after we have defeated the pandemic, thanks to the foresight and collaboration of our federal, state, and local government. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions for Dr. Toomey, myself, Dr. Lewin, Dr. Ruffiel? Yes.
Hey, my question is, we've been talking about the vaccine rolling out phases, and we're in this phase 1A. Do we know how long that phase is going to take before we can kind of transition into the next one? I know we talked so much about the general public, but any estimation on how long just getting through this first phase is going to take?
Dr. Toomey, yeah, probably.
And we, in our planning meeting today with the district health directors, we talked about that. We anticipate it'll take us pretty much the month of January to finish. All the healthcare providers, and there are more than 500,000 healthcare providers broadly defined, although at the rate that Dr. Lewin is managing to immunize, I think we may finish faster, but throughout the state, in fact, our district public health is actually working and setting up clinics for those providers that aren't themselves enrolled. So they're having provider clinics in the health departments for other providers. So that's another additional way that we're going to be reaching them. But we figure that it'll probably take as much of the month of January. But we're hopeful that by end of January, beginning of February, we'll start to roll into phase 1B, which is a significant number of people, which includes critical infrastructure workers as well as older individuals.
I was wondering, once we do move toward the general public, are y'all leaning toward going through primary care physicians, or are you leaning toward going through mass vaccination sites? I know there's some primary care doctors who don't know about it.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Toomey follow up. I will tell you that we actually had a conversation about that this morning and continue to talk about how we're going to do that. We are talking to anybody and everybody that would fall and meet the criteria to give the vaccine. I'd much rather have the problem of not having a provider not having enough vaccine to give than not having providers and have more vaccine than we have people to give shots. But we're talking to the Pharmacy Association. We're going to be talking to large public and private companies that have the facility. A good example would be a grocery store chain that also has a pharmacy. They could actually administer the vaccine there. So like, we are leaving no stone unturned for how we get the vaccine. We know the second part of this is going to be a lot more spread out than trying to vaccinate people at a place like Emory. But Dr. Toomey, do you have anything you want to add to that?
The answer is yes. We're going to do all of those.
Why don't you speak to just the primary care doctor?
Sure. I mean, because we would like very much to have primary care doctors working with us and have encouraged them to enroll as providers. And many of them have already worked with us for many years as providers through the Vaccine for Children's program. And so they're quite familiar with how to enroll. And many have, and we are continuing to reach out. And I have personally had conversations